Okay, so let's talk about forms. So in this video, we're going to review some basic information about HTML forms. So far we've talked about semantic tags, links, a little bit about lists. We talked about tables, and finally we want to review forms. So form controls are really common in application development, and they're super useful for websites too. So we can create a form that just asks the user to fill out some information, but we can also create forms that work like real applications or traditional applications that you'd find like on your computer. Like they could be a game, or they could be a piece of software that you use for work. And form controls allow you to create interactive elements on your web page that the users, I guess, can interact with. So let's get started. So before I get into my contact page, we're going to build a contact form today. First, let's talk about buttons. So let's go to my index page. And right now I have this polls app. And there's no content here. On the main page of the website, it's pretty boring. We have our header with our nav, and we've just got this generic content. So let's create a poll. What I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to create a div. And if you remember, we talked about semantic tags. Tags like main and footer and header, they have like a semantic value. It creates a group, and a bunch of tags go inside that group, but the tags themselves have their own kind of ideas about them, right? So like a footer contains like the content that you see at the bottom of, maybe every page on the website. It's like the footer information that goes there. And, it's pretty descriptive. The div tag is a way to make a group, but it has no semantic value. There's no description that goes along with it. So this is a poll, which is not a thing in like HTML5, but like it's not a specific thing written into the standard. But I can use this generic div to, serve as my grouping for my polls app. So this first poll it's going to be a poll. So I'm going to give it a class attribute, and I'm going to name it poll. And by doing this, even though it doesn't have like a semantic value for the element, by giving it a class of poll, I can target it with CSS or JavaScript and apply specific functionality to the stuff inside this group of tags. So this poll is going to have a header. I'm just going to call this an H2 for now, and we'll say okay, I'm just going to make this really easy. Best pie. And I'm going to close my H2 tag. And then I'm going to have some options to vote on. So best pie will have an apple pie. Oh, I got ahead of myself. So there's the apple pie. And then we'll have a blueberry pie. And then finally, our last pie to choose from will be, pumpkin. So pumpkin pie. Okay, so these are 3 pies, and if I run this, we can see the term best pie, or the words best pie, and then we have 3 choices here. But I can't do anything with these words. They're just words, and they're all by themselves. There's no markup associated with it, so let's make them buttons. So I can wrap these in the button tag. And then when I refresh, you'll see that the word apple is now a button, and I can click it and nothing happens, but I can still interact with it a little bit in the browser. And if I had JavaScript code that was written, I could have something happen when I click this button. So now let's wrap the other tags, the other words in the button tag. Okay. So now I've got my 3 buttons and I have a poll. Now, like I said before, nothing is happening. And now, usually when you have buttons like this, they would be within a form tag. But right now for this poll, I've got my this is just a prototype for what a poll is going to look like. And I'm going to copy that. So now I have 2 polls on the page, and this one will be best cake. And the 3 types of cake will be chocolate and yellow. And then we will do lemon. We'll just have lemon cake. All right, so here I have 2 polls, and right now there's no functionality built in, but well, I've got something. I've got something to look at here. And now let's go into my contact page and build our contact form. So in the contact page, I don't have much. I just have my header, and then in the main it says polls contact page. What I'm going to, oh, there it goes. It finally loaded. So I can see that content there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my preview in a new tab, and this will make it a little easier to preview my website as I start editing the contact page. So now I'm going to expand that tab like that, this frame, so that I can see my code a little bit better. So in the main, I'm going to create a header for this page. I'm just going to say contact us as my contact page, and then I'm going to create a form. So I'm going to start off with the form tag, and my form is going to contain some fields that you can use to email me. We'll just use that as an example to start off with. So in the first field, I'm going to ask for your email address. So I'm just going to write the word email. And then in the second field, I will ask you for the subject. You know, what do you want to talk to me about? Actually, I should also ask for your name. Who are you? That makes sense. Name, email, subject. And then finally, I'll have a bigger field where you can tell me what your message is. And the last thing on my form is I'm going to have a send button. Okay, so I've got all these things here. And if I preview my page, I have those words, but that's it. So I'm going to be creating labels and inputs and buttons and things like that in here, but it's still a pretty simple form, and there's a lot of information to know about forms. So if you're sitting down and you're creating a form for a contact page, and you're like, you know, this is for a real site, this is for something I'm deploying tomorrow, you definitely want to do a lot more research than what I'm going to demonstrate in the video. So obviously there's a lot of stuff to learn about when it comes to forms. I'm just going to be covering like some real basic stuff here. So let's go into our form and let's create an input after the word name. So the input tag is how we create a form field. There's lots of different input tags. There's also other form fields that we can create, like I just showed you the button tag on the other page. But we could also create a text area or a select menu, which is actually like a drop-down menu that uses the select tag. But for input, we could create a text input, an email input, a number input. Let me just show you what these look like. So if I add the keyword type equals, and then I give it a type of input, like text, that will create a box that I can type in. So here's my little box. This is my input, and I can type whatever I want in here. It's only a single line, so as I get to the end, it just continues on. It never goes to another line. So that's one of the limitations of it, but I can type any character I want into the input. If I come back here and I change this to, let's say, number, now the type of input is for numbers only. So if I try to type letters, nothing happens. But if I type numbers, it allows me to do that. And then the form control, and this is built into the browser. This is a browser function. Increases or decreases with these little arrows. It gives me this little control here. If you were looking at this on like an iPhone or something, it would look different. And then another type is a checkbox. And this looks really different. It's just a checkbox. Okay, and all I can do is check it. So it's important to research form controls when you're writing a form. And that's my advice to anyone who's a beginner and sitting down to write their first form. If you're going to put a text control, oh, sorry, that's wrong. If you're going to put a text input, make sure you read about it. Is your form accessible? Do you have all the required attributes? Validate your code with a W3 validator. I think that's important when you're starting out. Okay, so currently I have an input of type text, and then I'll do one for email. And I'm going to call this an email input because it comes with a little validation. Let me just add the send button. So it's an input, or at least I'm going to use an input to send this form, and the type of input is called submit. Now, this is going to look like a button, but it's not going to have the words. Like when I did a button tag, that was a two-sided tag with a word in the middle. The input tags are all one-sided tags. There's no word that goes in the middle. So to print the value on the button, my submit button, I have to use the value keyword. Whoops. Value equals, and then I can put some word in here. I'm just going to put send, and then we can go take a look at what that looks like. Here it is. So now if I type something in here that's not an email address and hit send, Chrome has this built-in validation. It says, hey, this is an email field, and you're missing the ampersand, or the @ sign, not the ampersand. It still says a missing part of the email address. So if I just put some gibberish with like a dot something else, now it sends the form. Okay, so next I need the subject. So I'm going to put another type of text input. And then finally message. Now message is going to be a little weird because I can't use a text input for message because our message could be multiple lines long. When you write an email to someone, you typically have more than one line that you send. Sometimes not, but you should have the option to include more than one line. We're going to use a different kind of form control, and that form control is called a text area. And this is a two-sided tag. So we can put stuff in between these tags. I'm going to put hello world. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, I have, after message, I have my text area, and I can write multiple lines of text here. It will just wrap onto the next line. And with CSS, I can control, the way that the user can interact with this. Like maybe I don't want them to resize it, or I only want them to resize it up and down and not left and right. So we can kind of control that a little bit and make for a better user experience. I can also change the way that these look by stacking them. One simple way to do this is in HTML is just to include the BR tag. And I can include this very quickly after all of my little inputs and text areas and stuff. And then I just have everything kind of in a really messy column. Now we're going to write CSS. Next week I'm going to be doing a CSS review video series, little mini series, and we're going to fix this. So if you're looking at this and you say, oh, this looks bad, and you want to fix it, don't definitely try it out, explore it on your side, explore different techniques for that, but don't worry, I will cover how at least I would approach this problem in my CSS review next week. Okay, so what happens when I send this? If I want to send this email now, it just sort of deletes everything. But if I look at my URL, I can see that there's a little question mark at the end of my URL. So what that tells me is that my form was sent. Where did it go and what did it send? That's the question I have to ask now. The answer is it went exactly here. It did a postback. It returned, well, it didn't do a postback. It returned the data back to itself, but there was no data. The data was empty. The reason why the data was empty is because I didn't name my inputs. Right now, the input here, even though I have this word in front of it that says name, the input itself has no way to categorize the data that it's going to send to the server. So I have to give it the name attribute, and confusing as this may be, the name is going to be name for the name input. For the email input, the name is going to be email. And then for the subject, the name is going to be subject. And then finally, the text area where the message is going to be contained, I'll have the word message or the name message. Okay, so I'm not going to name the input because, the submit button, because I don't need that data coming back to me. Now, if I refresh my page and I type some stuff in here, let's put a name. I'm going to put Bob, and then the email will be j@j.com, and then the subject will be food, and I'm just going to leave hello world there. And when I press send, when I look in the URL, I can see that the data has been sent to the form this time. Name equals Bob, and email equals j@j.com. Subject equals food, and the message equals hello plus world. So when data is sent through a form, if you don't specify a couple of things, it's just going to look like this. It's going to show up in the web browser. And if you are writing server-side code and you're looking to see how do I access this, you could access this with a get. So let's look at the form tag real quick. There's a couple of attributes that we can place in here. The first one is the action. So action is where the form is going to send the data. If I wanted it to go to a specific script file on my server, I could include that here. I just put the name of the script. So I could say script.php. That's a server-side script that might deal with this data. Now I don't have that over here, so I haven't created that. By default, it's just going to send it to itself, which is, on this server, it's contact.html. That's where it's sending it. Now the other method, attribute I should put is the method. So the methods that are common with forms is called post or get. And what we're seeing is actually the get method. And if I refresh this page, and I just put some gibberish in here, and hit send, I can see the data, and that's the get method. That's the get method working. That's how it works. If I write server-side code, I can access this variable like it's an array and then take the information out of it. If I change this method to post, it will send the data, but it will hide it from the URL. So even though we are, here we go. So we'll start with a fresh form. Here we go. So I'm sending this data to the server. It was sent, but there's nothing showing up here in the URL. So that's the way we want it. Okay, so the last thing is, well, what if I wanted to email someone? Like right now I don't have any server-side code, and I'm going to eventually get into that with these mini-series, but right now I just want a functional form. I can use something called a mail to link. So this is pretty old, but it will work. So if I say mail to, and I'm going to create some fake email, info at jeff.how. Oh, actually, that's a real email. So if I do info at jeff.how, and then I try this. Let me just refresh this page. I'll put in some stuff here. So my name this time is going to be LOL, and my email will be r@r.com. And then the subject will be foo. Now when I press send, it's going to launch my email client. So here, my email client is configured to be Gmail. And so it launches this new email, compose email window, and I can see that the email address is up here, info@jeff.how. The subject is blank, so I got to fill out a subject, but that data string is included in the body of the message. And so if I hit send, then I would receive this at info@jeff.how, and I would have to make sense of the string. So that's not the best user experience, and there's definitely more modern techniques to deal with the idea of a contact form. But at its basics for today, this works. Okay, so let me go back to my form and continue working on it a little bit. There's one thing I don't like, and that is that when I click on the word name, nothing happens. I have to click inside the input in order to type. So if I go to my replet and I look at this, the word name is just sitting here next to input. It's not really associated with any tags, and it's not linked to the input in any like semantic way or programmatic way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the word name and I'm going to wrap it in a label. So the label tag has a keyword called for. And in for, I can say what this label is for. Yeah, I hate talking about forms because I feel like I just say the same things and it just sounds so weird in my own head. Okay, so label, this label is for something called name, right? And we see that the name of this input is right here, and that's name, so that matches. But this actually is not how you link it. You have to include an attribute in your input called ID. And I'm just going to name the ID name. The word name has lost all meaning to me at this point. It's here a million times. So now this label is programmatically associated with the input. If I go to my preview page and I click on name, now I can type in here. So that's handy. This is really useful for accessibility purposes. Now there's definitely other stuff we have to add for accessibility, but this is the basics. This is where it begins. And now the word name is programmatically associated with the input. And we should do that with all of our labels. Now there's another technique you can use where you take this label tag and you close it down here, but I'm going to use this technique. The last one would be, the next thing to do would be to add the labels for email, for subject, for message. And I'm going to do that again for email because it's a different word and the word is not name. So label for equals. So what is it for? It's for the email input. Okay, so I've got that. And on the other side, I'm going to close the label. And then in my input, I have to add an ID because right now I don't have the ID as email. I have no ID. And I just want to show you that. So here, if I refresh my page again, I click on name. That works great. What happened to... Okay. Let me refresh here. Here we go. So if I click on name, it puts my cursor focus inside the name and I can type. But when I click on email, nothing happens again. And that's just because I don't have the ID attribute. So if I add ID equals, and I say that this is the email input, now when I go to my contact page, I can click on, if I refresh, I could click on email, and now I can type in the email field. Okay, and this would work too for message and subject. Okay, so that's it for now. That covers forms at a really basic level. And if you complete your labels for subject and message, you'll have the contact form part of this project done. There's definitely a lot to cover in HTML. I really glossed over just kind of the basics that I needed for the polls project. Next week, I will begin the my mini series on CSS, which is going to be a quick crash course or review of CSS, and we'll keep going from there. Thanks for watching.